Hi, my name is Matt Perez, and we're in rHatchery.live, and we're here with Kendell Johnson, who's our guest, and Jose Leal, my partner in crime here, and we're going to be talking about mostly ownership, but a lot of other things. Someone is seconding. Could it be me? Well, let's see if I don't know. Someone is echoing, so I'm gonna. So Kendell, why don't you tell us about your business and things about yourself so we can get to know you better?
Thank you, Jose. It's great to be with you, John. So my story and journey began almost 20 years ago. Young student out of university in Montreal, and quickly became obsessed with technology and all things cloud, and really had the first cut of understanding business at Oracle, then IBM, and other various organizations. But I really, really fell in love with tech, with Salesforce, right? Someone who you guys I know you guys know very well. Had a chance to work with a lot of the top executives there intimately, and they trusted me in opening up the Montreal office as well as other various important projects. And that's when I really understood that there was a change happening in tech, that subscription when the cloud was taken over. Fast forward a few years, we brought in some very cool companies into Canada, like Turo and a few other subscription-based companies. We helped them set up, really got to know the business, and I then fell in love again with subscription model. Students of economics and study, and I wanted to go back and understand, hey, why are so many people turned on by this new phenomenon? And Matt, you said it best, it's nothing new, but it was a new push by millennials. And I really dove into research to find out what is making people tick, what are some of the drivers that people look for, and that's one of the things I'm here to say is that subscription it's certainly not a new phenomenon, but it is, in my opinion, here to stay and a new reality for many North Americans.
So you really believe that people are not going to own things, but subscribe or whatever, have temporary possession of it. And I think I mentioned this in backstage that Buckminster Fuller, who is quoted a lot of the time, says something about lighters, making things lighter, making your house lighter, making your car lighter. And I don't know how he meant that, but subscriptions or any kind of temporary possession is a way to make it lighter. So in Airbnb, I own that house for a week or 3 days or a month or whatever it is, but I don't have to carry all my furniture over there. I don't have to carry all my stuff over there. I know people that live off rental furniture, and they change it often. You go into a house like, oh, what happened here? Oh, I called them and they brought this stuff in, and very casual about the whole thing. So yeah, I agree with you that that's in the up and up. So what is subscription? What is subscriber?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think you're absolutely right there, Matt. One, we'll talk about what Subskryb is in a moment. But the root of subscription and the basis of the company is that subscribers, they have a lot, and the things that they don't want to worry about anymore is the cost of ownership. There's a lot of costs. It's not just the physical cost, but the mental costs. Now, one of the things that I really love about this industry and my job is that I've met a lot of people, and they say one of two things. It's very hard to afford this lifestyle today, or they were never able to afford this lifestyle today. And both of there's many people like that. Those I would say personas care deeply about. One, how do we make it so that those who need those particular products, like you said, the Airbnb, the furniture, they have access to it without the mental weight. And then upward mobility for those second persona in terms of either ownership, we can talk about that in a moment, but also the ability for them to have that plan. Because in today's world, rising interest rates, I'm sure we'll talk on that, and many other rising costs, it's almost unaffordable for many Americans and Canadians to obtain basic car, basic housing, even food, gentlemen. And I know that you guys can appreciate that. It's something that we must change.
I don't know if you watch John Oliver, but the last episode was on HOAs and some of the terrible things that happen around HOAs. Those are homeowner associations, and the homeowner association, which is elected, is neighbors and stuff like that. They outsource that process, and of course, those people are money making, and they basically push people out of the housing and stuff like that for this violation and that violation of the rules, and you sign a contract. And so I understand the mental thing. Now we're more into, there's fiat ownership, which is where we live today.
That's right.
Which is, I own the car, and if you want to buy it, then I have to sell it to you. I own the house, and if you want to buy it, I have to sell it to you. I own the place where you work. If you want to work here, you're going to work here for me, 8 hours a day or more if I can get it out of you. And that's a basic part of the problem. That the whole fiat ownership, which is encased in law, I mean, is sacred, right? And we believe that if ownership is good for one person, then it's good for a lot of people, right? And so we think that the concept of co-ownership, we all own the place that we work at, we all own the car, we all own it's kind of in line with subscription. So you have to pay something. It doesn't come out of the blue, but it allows you to have that common ownership, if you will. So,
or access.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, yes, you're right. Access.
I'll add to that, Matt, and that, let's call it what it is. It's a sense of power. And you by owning the asset, have power over the asset. If you're the sole owner,
Yes.
if you're renting it out or Airbnb, you then receive value for the time that is rented out. That's how it works today. But I'll challenge that notion that there are many folks, millennials, Gen X, who they don't even like the concept of fractional ownership. They want even more flexibility. They want the ability to have a subscription model or models that meet their lifestyle. And the reason for that, we'll talk about what we said before, that the ownership concept, it boggles them down, not only financially, but mentally, but the third one is cost. That's a big one for a lot of millennials. If I work at this job 9 to 5, I can't be an influencer. I can't take a vacation. I have to be within the promoter 9 to 5. I tell you, gentlemen, Jose, Matt, that is a huge deal and the basis of our company at Subskryb. And we believe that there is a model for everyone. As an owner, you have the ability to, it's not just about ownership. Your intent is to share a product and give that access to multiple folks who will like you said, Matt, feel that they have flexibility to access that product at any time that they want and give it back at any time that they don't need it. As a subscriber, we are meeting a subscription model and really transforming the concept of ownership and fitting it into that lifestyle that customers want. We spoke about this off backstage, right, Matt. Nothing new, but the demand today is like no other. $1.3 million will be the subscription economy in 2025. Why is that? And there's three main points. One is that lifestyle has certainly changed. We believe mobility in the lifestyle has certainly changed. And the way people look at a car, very different. They look at it more like a cell phone. The second is folks have no choice. My generation, your generation, we had more opportunities to own, fit into our lifestyle, and grow with it. There's no possibility for that now, gentlemen. Right. We really are at a point where interest rates are making it a choice of food or housing, transportation or housing. And the third point is the projection. A lot of younger folks don't know if they're going to see the same wealth that your generation has. They really don't. And they need options.
So I have a friend, he's in somewhere in Africa right now, but anyways, he's from Colombia originally and all that stuff. And what he's doing is kind of a subscription kind of model where you sign up to the service that he offers, and then you have insurance and cars and all this stuff. I don't know about cars and stuff like that, but certainly insurance and a place to work and all that anywhere in the world where they're at. You know, I should put you both in contact. I think there's a lot of in common between you guys.
Yeah.
But
what Kendell just said and what came to mind was really the work that one of our colleagues in Europe has done, Yuri, and Yuri was designed and wrote a book about it, Person to Person. He designed a model of accounting where the system is where the vehicle, the house, is autonomous. In other words, it doesn't have an owner. It has an agreement with a bunch of different owners, a bunch of different people who have access to it, as you pointed out, Kendell. And that because the individual item has its own presence legally, then it's not owned per se. It simply has a legal agreement with different participants, people who may use it for a while or may share in the use of it for a while. I thought that side kind of sounded like what you were describing. Obviously, that's looking at an economic system that is more so than just converting the systems that we have today. Is that in alignment with what you're describing?
It's an interesting proposition, Jose. It's one that we've seen and studied to a certain degree. We love that model. We certainly see it in the future. To get there, certainly there's going to be a lot of learning on both sides.
A lot of steps to take.
So you got to think about, absolutely. But let's think about this, gentlemen. In America, much of the laws are based around ownership. Right?
Yes.
Right. So this concept will have to be adopted. And I got to tell you, COVID's helped us do that. Interest rates has helped do that. The cost of food has helped for us to really understand that. So the feasibility of us moving to that type of economy, I truly believe that's something on the horizon. Before we get there, what we will see is a lot of hosts, or what we call vehicle investors or asset investors, house investors, item investors, and subscribers. And this marketplace will mature to, I am a subscriber and I'm an investor of all different types because I have to be. And the flow of money will increase because it's no longer, like you said, Jose, my item. I'm putting an item out there. It's its own product and it's autonomous, right? And the state, the shareholders that brought it to fruition, they'll see some rewards for that. But there is a lot of evidence in statistics that we've seen, and even the economy, that consumers want more options.
Right.
Consumers need to see more viability in the returns. This is why there are so many different ideas. Were great, some not so much, but people are looking for more ways to make the dollar go longer, as well as more options for themselves. Those two things can only exist in certain models, and one of those models is subscription.
That makes a ton of sense. One of the things, as Matt mentioned, about our view of the current system being a fiat-based view. In other words, everything is about, as you put it, power, right? Or I like to call it force, right? A force-based system where the individual not only holds the home and therefore has power over the home, but they also have power over what that home looks like in this neighborhood and this community. And it imposes on not just the asset, but it imposes on the people around us, because we have this fiat power, or the ability to say, this is mine. It's not ours, it's mine. And so separating ourselves from that ownership gives us the ability to actually think about, how do we relate to these things commonly, right? Not just, I'm the owner, I can do whatever the heck I want because I'm the owner. When I'm not the owner and I actually have a relationship that isn't one of I own it, then how does that change? How does that relationship change with our homes, with our cars, with our products that we will be subscribing to? So how do you see that? What's the human relationship aspect and legal in essence, right?
Jose, you bring up a great point. It's, in my opinion, a changing concept constantly, and I'll tell you why. I think you said it best. How things are defined is dependent upon the owners. Car makers own the production of cars, and so they have allowed, only till now, electric phenomenon to only happen now. Let's be honest about that.
And they could have done it many, many years ago, as we know.
Many years ago, right? But I'll give you another example. Let's, on the demand side, on the topic of cars, many car buyers really wanted a car to last long, to be functional, extension of their smartphone. But that meant that any car will do. I can tell you for a fact, because we've done the research, good reason many car manufacturer OEMs did not want that. They wanted you to see the differences, with good reason, on the different types of cars, so that you would spend more for the ones that cost more. And they can do that because they own the car. So they slowed down the evolution of the smartphone and the car, and changed the algorithms and the way that it was displayed and the infotainment system, because they wanted the car to be the focus. More and more car buyers have said, the most important is how I connect to information. Everything else is not as important. But because they don't own the cars, they're either renting, leasing, or otherwise, they had to wait up until this long, including the electrical revolution. I'm here to say that that momentum from the demand side has reached a point where car makers, OEMs, have no choice but to really change their attitude a little bit more to what the customers want. Electrification, bigger infotainment screens, more comforts, more car-like than truck-like. That's not by accident. That's because subscribing to a car or renting a car has increased in terms of demand. Customers are going to say, it doesn't meet what I want, I'm just not going to take that car long term. You're totally right about that. And I don't think it stops just with the auto industry. If you look at the way that we consume movies and shows, we've seen that also change in terms of phenomenon of subscription. Food, we've seen delivery of food at a lower cost, or things we've seen purchased through Amazon and Amazon-like companies. And it doesn't stop there. I'm here to say that I believe that more and more Americans and Canadians will err on the side of lifestyle and costs more than convenience. They don't care from, because the avenue to get it is much easier today.
The question that I would ask about that, though, is if the manufacturers are still able to keep control of the manufacturing piece, are we still going to live off of whatever they offer us? Are we going to be able to create our own subscribable services and products? Because that's where I think there's this difference, right? If we get the GMs of this world to provide us with, slightly better infotainment system that speaks to my iPhone and so on and so forth, which they've actually been going the opposite direction. Are we going to be able to, is that going to be appeasing us for everything that you've just described? Or are we going to be able to get new companies to emerge that are actually going to be providing us what we're seeking? Is that what the new Apple, for example, is that what the new Apple car is?
Bang on. And you took the words out of my mouth. I think it's a slow evolution, in my opinion. And there'll be agents of change. I believe that Subskryb is an agent of change. There are many others who are agents of change. If you think about Toro, some of our major competitors, they're agents of change as well. But the incumbent, the manufacturer, realizes that they have to have an options. And so we'll see a lot of the change come in the form of options, and agents of change will complement the marketplace. And then it's the consumer, the onus is still on the consumer to choose with their words, which we've been seeing, to choose with demand, which we saw in COVID, to choose with how they consume. It's not what they consume, but if they're no longer buying small cars that are just good to get around, and now they're buying more larger SUVs that have more options that can be shared amongst 4 or 5 people in a subscription model at a hotel, at a condominium, whenever they want it, that's a completely different model than when you and I thought. And so,
and there's another aspect. That you're not selling to an individual. You're not relying on the opinion of an individual that's competing with other people to have the bigger car and the whatever. You're selling to a community. So
right.
subscribers to a car is a community, and they're voting with their dollars every time they say, I don't want to subscribe to this car, I want to subscribe to that car, which is more economical or electric or whatever it is. So the manufacturers of those cars would either go away, or they have to learn how to be more nimble and be on their feet. So I see a lot of value in that. You mentioned one thing that is that I don't think they're a good force in society, and that's the Uber model. Because, let's say that we all drive for Uber. We don't own anything. We own our car, which we bring along to the Uber experience, but we don't. The brand Uber is owned by Uber. It's owned by the executives at Uber. And so that's that's another conversation we can have about that type of ownership. So they Fiat own that brand, which we're all building for them. And we only get, right now, I think it's 50%. The guy told me the other day, he says, oh, they're only paying us 50%, which is pretty bad. But now it's either, if you want to go international, they're the only option. And the only competition they have in the US, I don't know Canada, but in the US is Lyft. And there's no competition. Basically, Lyft is copying everything that Uber is doing. So
I think we're looking to change that.
It's not a good model. It's not a good model, is what I'm trying to say.
I'll tell you what they have done that has uplifted the subscription experience. Uber allowed for more options away from ownership. In fact, ownership none is, and whenever you want is very much part of their model. The second thing that they've done is allow for more flexibility in the lifestyle. And there's a lot of good companies come out, including Subskryb, who our backers truly believe that we will compete with the Ubers of the world wherever they are, because we are that in between rideshare and ownership, or right in that middle. It's if you're taking Uber 4 times a day, and I agree with you, Matt, you don't own the car or the driver or the experience really, as long as unless it goes well.
With the brand.
Or the brand. With Subskryb, you're subscribing to a car. It's not ownership, but it's not rideshare. If you take rideshare and have an experience 3 or 4 times a day, a week, that's a lot of Uber time. You might as well subscribe to a car and really take control, like you say, of your brand, because you have the car and your experience. And that's what we do. And that's why we believe that not too distant future from now, we'll be able to compete with them head on. Nobody who has our model. The second thing I will say that rideshare has done is elevated uniformly across the world the notion of more options that are controlled by customers. Because the one thing I think, Matt, that we can agree with is when you call a car, you do have that power to either call a car or not, but you don't have that payment of a car. And that's economical power that's given back to the consumer. That's what a lot of investors are worried about.
I see that
You're not
of a subscription,
yes.
as opposed to an Uber. But I wanted to make clear that the gig economy is really very exploitive and not something that we want to have anything with. So I just want to make that distinction.
And I agree with Kendall and what you're saying, Matt, as well. It's not so much what's being offered, that what's being offered is in the right direction. We're talking about splitting the vehicle, the use of the vehicle, of a vehicle over many, many people over the a single day in the case of an Uber vehicle. What we're saying is we've taken the vehicle that used to be in everybody's parking spot,
Yeah.
sitting there waiting to be used, and using it continuously for a period of time. The problem is that individual is now being hemmed in. He doesn't own the service he offers, right? He's forced to have a car of a certain age, of a certain style, of a certain this and that, in order to be able to be in that marketplace. But he takes the risk. If he doesn't have enough service, that's not the company's problem, right? If he doesn't work enough hours, that's not the company's problem. If he doesn't pay for the gas, that's not the company's problem. And yet the company is the one who, when he works and delivers a good service, the company benefits from building its brand.
Yeah.
And the individual suffers. They take the risk, the drivers take the risk, the company takes the benefits. That's, I think, where we're talking. But I agree with you, Kendell, that it's still, even though it's not a good structure for gig workers, it's still a really going in the right direction.
Yes.
Of where people want to consume. I mean, I drive my car once a week. It's sitting there in the carport. 7 days out of the week, I drive it typically once a week. And it makes no sense. And my neighbors do the same thing. Why do I have a 2,000-pound hunk of metal sitting, both losing value and physically rotting away? It makes no sense. And we've spent a lot of human lives to dig those minerals out of the ground, to transport them together, to assemble them together, to turn them into a vehicle, to have that vehicle sit there and rot away. It makes, we haven't talked about, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about the behavioral changes that you're describing, I think, very well, Kendell. But we haven't talked about what happens with nature, because we're abusing nature for this thing of I own it. Most people have homes that are much bigger than they need. They have cars that are much bigger than they need. They have cars that are their own that aren't being used most of the time. Is that what we're talking about?
Yep. 100%. And the human cost as well. Jose, this is what gets me up in the morning, makes me so passionate about being in the subscription model. You nailed on a bunch of things that I know just a lot of heartstrings were going there, because I think about them so often. The cost on the cost on human lives, not only from a economical health or level, but the opportunity cost of, if we're taking things out of the ground and it's causing harm to these, and that community ultimately is going to be lost. That's just the reality of it. The second thing that I think you accurately described very articulately is, if it's asset that's doing nothing, then really it's opportunity cost, one, financially, but two, to reduce the stress on the economy. One car can serve 20 people instead of 20 cars serving each individual person. Just makes more economical sense. But the last part is what really gets me up in the morning, is these conversations through subscriptions, new ideas. And through my team, one of the things that we have said is that we as a company want to be more empowering to the owners, the vehicle investors, those individual business owners. We almost want to be like an incubator and empower them on the platform. So it'll say A, B, and C company, or a C, D, and E company, and we're promoting them and teaching them how to be better business owners on the platform, but ultimately to be good stewards on the communities that are underserved, communities, many in the Black and brown communities that don't have opportunities to grow. Hire the students or the single mother, bring them into your vehicle investor portfolio, and uplift. Use less vehicles, just the fleet that you have, but utilize them a little bit more proactively for the business, and not when it's not being needed. The last thing is also, I'll say one more thing that kind of ties us in a bow, is as we're all coming up with these ideas of what's good and what's not, and we're taking away fiat from a lot of these companies and saying, think about it a bit differently. Think about it about what you're constructing, because if you're not, we're not going to consume that, or we have options to consume it another way. Think about the communities that you're impacting, both supply and demand. Think about the product itself. Can it last a little longer and be in use a little bit more efficient? And that's only possible if you're contributing to a model every day in smaller bites. With a purchase, it's one purchase, and he no longer has to think about that car because it's out the door. But if I have to attend to you with good customer service and a good product consistently and a good name, then I'm going to care, Jose and Matt, about what you think about every single day. And so what I manufacture tomorrow will really be based on our relationship today. And I think that's what subscription does today. If you can be, and I apologize for being long-winded, but I do think this is important as we talk about subscription 2.0 now, right? If you can be that subscription company who is that incubator to make you better, to really have you shine, to teach you the right ways of conducting the business, to give you a better product, that model, in my opinion, has a longer life because your customers will stay with you longer. And I say this to say, this is where the economy is going. This is what we're seeing on TV and our food. It really is about customer service, superior product, and in tune with the customers. And that's what Subskryb is about. And there are many other companies that think about this, but we're not going back anymore. So I'm making the argument today to say that companies like this will stand the test of time because the economy is moving in this direction.
Yes.
This interest rate is done to the economy.
Yeah.
What has go ahead.
I was just you brought me back to when I was in Toronto, some 25 years ago. I started a company there called autonet.ca, which was at the time, so we're talking about cars. So at the time was the first automotive portal in Canada that had new cars, used cars, dealers, and all that other good stuff for the auto consumer. And when you think about car buying, it's a relationship between someone and a dealer / manufacturer every 20 or so years.
That's right.
So I don't have to listen to you for 20 years. I don't need to have a relationship with you for 20 years. And so the whole industry was, I sell you the car and then screw you. I don't need you anymore as a manufacturer, right? The dealership was like, yeah, I want your service business, right? But as a manufacturer, I don't need you because you're not going to buy a car anytime soon. In 20 years, you might buy another car, or maybe 10 years or 15 years on average. And so that cycle of building a relationship where I can change my mind. Next month, I'll just swap to another service. And
Right.
the month after that, I'll swap to another one. You now have to pay attention to me. We need to have a relationship. I think that's what you just said, but it really resonated as I bounced back to that reality in that old world of mine.
Well, and it brings that connection closer. I mean, right now, like you said, the dealership in between, and then there's the marketing people who do all kinds of stuff with the data that they get, and they're projecting years in the future, and there's no relationship there. But if I'm renting, 10% of these cars today, or subscribing to a subscription service, And then the next month they don't want that car anymore. They want some other car. That tells me something immediately. So I could see where that's more responsible. The thing not to forget is that the manufacturer is still the fiat owner of their car. And that's what we want to eliminate. But that's a different story. Not different, but a longer story.
Yeah.
But I just want to remind people that we're about 14 minutes over the time, because this has been very interesting, and not what I expected, by the way. When I saw real estate and all that stuff, I went, this is going to fit, but it does fit. So we want to go on, or which we can, or do we want to cut it down, or?
Sure, I have 5 more minutes if you guys are okay.
As far as I'm concerned, let's go.
I wanted to mention that it doesn't stop with physical goods. I want to make the argument that digital goods will be affected, and the way we think will be affected. The amount of space that this is a bit of a stretch, that an employer has on employees today will change. As they get used to subscription, I want it, no I don't, for this amount of time or less, more of my time or less, they'll do the same with their person.
Right,
And
it trains people to think differently. Yes, I agree.
And this is what another movement that I watched very closely over COVID, as I made the argument today that the subscription really, the lifestyle management from a person has taken over and will never go back after COVID. What I really meant is people had the opportunity to hone what they like, what they don't like, where they want to be, what they don't want to be most of the time. A lot of folks had said, that's at home with my kids, working remote. And we saw a phenomenon of folks working remotely. Fast forward 18 months, and the change in the economy is all of us here are students of the economy, and we saw that affected many organizations, including our favorite brands, and a lot of layoffs. What that said to a lot of folks, especially younger folks, they don't have as much forward-thinking opportunity to make money as we did, especially potentially your generation. So they feel different.
Are you saying that we're older than you? Is that what you're saying? Are you calling us old? It sounds like you're calling us old. I just want to hear that clearly. You're calling us old. Is that
2 years older? A lot of these folks, they're not going to go back to unless I am viewed as value. I'm not doing that anymore. I would rather have 5 or 6 side hustles and this side hustle phenomenon and be in control of my, again, lifestyle. And exactly. My argument here is that's what's going to fuel a lot of what's going to happen in the future.
Yes.
Lifestyle. Couldn't agree with you more. Could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you've brought to us, because I think the work that we're doing, which is around decentralizing everything, right? And ownership being the biggest piece. So decentralizing ownership is critical. Yes. That is, as you pointed out, that's going to take some time, but that's where people that's where their direction is going. The younger folks, especially. And the old guys, as you pointed out, us old guys, we will die in our old homes, and then those homes will turn into something that hopefully will become something different. But it's not about the old ways of working and the old ways of owning and the old ways of living. Your experience, you said you worked at Oracle and IBM and Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce changed online computing forever, right? And we went from you need to buy the software, you need to install it on your own hardware, you need to have it in your own premises, to, well, it's in the cloud. What's the cloud? Doesn't matter. It is. And now I don't want to have to install software. It's just somebody says, oh, you have to install this. What the hell? Install what? That makes no sense. So we've already had that in the digital world to some degree. And it's thanks to that I believe we're at this stage where you're describing everything else is going to go down that path.
Amen. I totally agree. I made a living at Salesforce on that notion. And at first it was hard. As you mentioned, it was a lot easier a few years later. And then the demand came to us. And I believe the same thing will happen with Subskryb.
Yeah. Well, I wish you good luck with that. And we should keep talking, because anything that we can do to help in that space, I think that's part of what we're doing.
Well, we should introduce them to Oliver in my case, and in your case.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they can figure out if it makes sense or not. And because I think you guys are around, you're aiming at the same thing for change, the same, making that an agent of change, if you will. I think you're aiming at the same direction. So, and Christina would kill me if I didn't mention the book. It's called Radical Companies Without Employees, Bosses or Employees. And you can find it everywhere, but start at radicalcompanies.com. And then you can get it for nothing, or you can buy a book or whatever you want. With that, I think we're done.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kendell. It's been a pleasure having this discussion with you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Joel. It was an absolute pleasure. I look forward to potentially coming back and continuing other conversations. Thank you, Joel.